Hello, everybody,
Hello.
and welcome to Coffee Class with Young Screenwriters. We are a resourcing community for up-and-coming screenwriters, and today we are breaking our second ever pilot, What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes, which is a sitcom, which is the first sitcom we've broken down on the channel, which is exciting and a little different in the sense of, most sitcoms are 30 minutes versus an hour drama, like Shadow and Bone last time. So this is going to be a little different. We talked about this in the Patreon earlier, but revisiting it, Alexie, what was your experience with it?
I mean,
did you watch the series? Did you watch the season?
I didn't watch the whole season again. I have seen I've seen it all.
Yeah.
But this time I only rewatched the pilot just to try to so I could keep straight what happens later. And this time I was paying more attention to, like, I had always thought of pilots as the inciting incident of the season, but
right.
I hadn't yet come into this thinking about it as its own thing too, like looking at it as a pilot on its own. So that was really interesting. And it's always fun to show it to other people. And we forced my sister-in-law and her husband to watch it. And so that was very fun.
Their experience?
They enjoyed it. It's one of those things like where I was like, I don't know if they think it's funny because it's not one of those ha-ha shows, It's more like oh, that's funny.
But
it's like one of those.
Maybe that's just my sense of humor, but this is like the funniest show currently on television, in my opinion. Like I laugh to like nothing else as much. That's current right now. Like I have a lot of shows that are canceled that I love, but
you just like, you know how like when you're showing someone something that you think is funny and so you're like, ha 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 ha, look at them to like see if they're gonna laugh too.
No,
it was like that.
No, I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that's
I bet
like.
everybody else does. Everybody else knows exactly what I'm talking about.
So upon revisiting this and actually breaking it down with our adapted prototype TV tentpole, one of the big takeaways for me was how much was actually going on in this. There are like 3 to 4 little plot lines that all kind of intersect. And some of them, like the Colin Robinson's plot line, is Colin Robinson only appears 3 times in the episode. And once is in Act 1, once is in Act 2, and once in Act 3. And the time in Act 1 is kind of a setup for a payoff in Act 3. Like it's a payoff that like sort of actually addresses the plot point of like, okay, are they going to kill the virgins or not? Like, it's actually everything is mechanically well placed, and everything has like its own sort of sense of everything's really balanced together.
Yeah, sure.
Talk about I'm just going to do my breakdown, and then we can talk.
Let me grab it for you. I'll do what I did with Avi.
Yeah, I apologize. Yes, let's do it. But I apologize for if any spelling mistakes. I just wrote this up this morning as I was rewatching it. But so the pilot of What We Do in the Shadows opens on Guillermo, who is, in my opinion, the protagonist of the show, although there are episodes that feature other characters, and the other characters are as important. Like the whole core cast of Nadia, Laszlo, Nandor, and Guillermo, like they are the core cast, and any one of them can be like the primary character of an episode. In this episode, though, I would say it focuses functionally on Guillermo. But we meet him, and he's awakening his master Nandor, and he's sort of introducing us into the world. And he sort of says like, I'm a familiar for vampire. Being a vampire is familiar is like being a best friend who is a slave. And as he's sort of opening up the casket, and Nandor is having this sort of really silly kind of like it's supposed to be melodramatic, but it looks really stupid from like a documentary camera locked off in a room. Him being propped up and it's like, oh, you're so scary, master, and he's anything but scary. I think this moment does a few things other than establishing who Guillermo is, what kind of his damage is, what this guy's flaw is. He's in this really terrible situation, and he doesn't necessarily know how terrible it is. But more importantly, it shows the humor of the show. This is going to be super deadpan, super like using the mockumentary format of like characters looking into the camera. Like Guillermo does the gym and looks at the camera for like a moment of emphasis. No laugh tracks, which is great. But we get a sense of who Guillermo is, what he wants more than anything. It's the 10th year anniversary of him being Nandor's familiar, and he believes that his master is going to make him into a vampire. This is Guillermo's grand passion in life. And he's actually, I think Guillermo's the key to the show. I think he is the heart of the show in the sense of he is the character who has an earnest, genuine desire that really defines who he is. He wants to be a vampire more than anything. And this is what Pixar calls the grand passion of a character. Not every show has to have one, or every character has to have one. But I do think that the fact that it's something tangible, like to become a vampire is it's a status symbol for Guillermo. It's like a thing you can attain. It's a magic thing, but like it's something he desperately doesn't have and he desperately wants. It's not something he kind of sort of wants. And protagonists who have grand passions, grand desires that are fundamentally unmet tend to be better center points. And if you have a TV protagonist who doesn't have like some sort of great unmet grand passion, maybe consider how this would be different if you did. Anyway, let's move on. So immediately after introducing Guillermo and his relationship with Nandor, we meet the rest of the cat house, Nadia, Laszlo, Nandor, and they are all basically, Nandor's in the foyer. He's got this letter and he starts arguing with everybody about like, I have a letter, I'm going to read it in the drawing room. And they're like, well, Laszlo's like, just read it here. Who cares? And he said, no, we're going to read it in the drawing room. And this interaction tells us what their relationship is, that these are all kind of narcissistic, squabbling vampires, and that they basically don't, I'm sure they get along, but they don't get along in the way tenuous roommate relationships don't get along. And there are all these great little exchanges that are sort of like, yeah, they're vampires, but they're roommates. Like they argue about the hygiene of, you're leaving half dead bodies around. Clean it up, will you? It's all these like little recognizable social behaviors on to supernatural beings, which is part of what makes it sort of more grounded in the relationships. Anyway, we establish the normal world through these situations. We establish the normal world of each of these characters, Nadia, Laszlo, and Nandor. They're all stuck in the past for different reasons. That was my read, and we have each of them, we have a little interview. We have Nandor. He talks about he was called Nandor the Relentless. He would, kill people, and he was a king of some sort of country that doesn't exist anymore. And they'd be like, "Oh, Nandor, please don't kill me." And he says, "I'm going to kill you," and I never relented because I would never relent. I'm paraphrasing that, but it's a great joke. And we have this interview with Nadia where we sort of, she sort of talks about, Nandor's the big turkey, Laszlo's my big wild crazy bear, and then you see her chasing him, like screaming, so often what works about the mockumentary format is showing the dissonance between what the person presents in the interview and then what the documentarian cuts to, which is obviously differently characterized. Like she talks about their great romance, and then you sort of see them like actually interacting in the world, and it's chaos and terrifying. And we meet Laszlo, and he gives this great story about how, Nadia turned him into a vampire, and he was the most beautiful woman. Then she turned into a bat and ate me. And there are great jokes about used to have leprosy, or all these like little characterizing things. But functionally, we, in this sort of sequence of events, intercut with interviews, we get a sense of who these people are. They're lazy vampires who don't seem to do anything other than just hang out in their house in Staten Island. And when they finally when Nandor doesn't relent, and he gets them to sort of finally, go to the drawing room where he'll read the letter. They read the letter, and this is the inciting incident of the episode, which is different than maybe what Alexie was talking about earlier, which is like the inciting incident of the show. But in this episode, the inciting incident is they read the letter. Oh my God, the Baron, who's a famous vampire that they all know, is coming to visit from the old country tomorrow. This is a huge problem for a few reasons. One, they don't have, adequate sort of living arrangements. They don't have the presentations. They need to get virgins. They need to, sort of, get the right decorations. Oh, we can't get alligators. Oh, can we just get a van? At least make the van black. Like basically, they're not prepared for this. So the rest of the episode is basically a reaction to this inciting incident. We got to get ready for the Baron, and the B plot of the vampires, which I'm just characterizing as the B plot, but Laszlo and Nadia, functionally, they believe. Oh, sorry, I have to mention this is where we meet Colin Robinson, and Colin Robinson is an energy vampire, which is very surprising. You see all this gothic imagery. You see this guy who's dressed like an accountant, and he has this ability to drain the energy of people by boring them to death and by being extremely tedious and irritating. And he says, "Oh, we're the most common type of vampire. I feed," and you see intercut with him at his office at a day job, people falling asleep while he's boring them. This functions as a setup because this is kind of the Chekhov's gun of the episode. Chekhov's gun being the sort of the device that if you plant in the drawer, if it's a gun you plant in a drawer in Act 1, the gun has to be fired in Act 3. Colin is definitely we've established he drains the energy out of people. It's going to come back. And he's obviously going to drain the energy of people later in the episode. And there's a little interesting framing. So we get more of Guillermo's normal world after the episode inciting incident, but it's still important to get in. If we didn't get a sense of what Guillermo does on a day-to-day basis, we would be missing something. But right after they decide that they have to get ready for the Baron's arrival, we see Guillermo in his day-to-day routine. He's blocking sunlight with the boards. He prepping the attic. He's throwing out bodies, which he says is a major part of his job. He's cleaning, at least in the way they want him to clean. And we most importantly, we get a sense of he shows pictures of him as a child dressed as a vampire. And it sort of hammers home the idea that he has always wanted to be a vampire ever since he was a kid, and that this is kind of like an opportunity for his dream job. He's slumming it so he can one day become a vampire, like Antonio Banderas in Interview with a Vampire, which was the first Hispanic vampire shown in mainstream media. If he can do it, I can do it, which is a great moment. And from this moment, the last moment of we've established all our main cast, their normal worlds, what their day-to-day lives are. An inciting incident that's disrupting the normal worlds, we go into Act 2 of the sitcom. And Act 2, we basically is framed from objectives and obstacles, very similar to a feature, where the objective is to find virgins to satiate the Baron's bloodlust in time for his arrival, prepare for the Baron's arrival. I should cut that out, Alexie. But obstacles. First thing Guillermo does, we need virgins. He goes to a LARPing event of all these kids. You get this guy being like, yeah, I'm now like a high-level paladin, It's definitely, it's the cliche, like, oh, nerds who LARP obviously are virgins, which is kind of unfair. And I think it's a little bit of a cliche, but I think it works in the context of the show because it's not particularly mean-spirited. But we have Guillermo's going after these virgins, and he has this great line where he says, "I'm not a killer. I find people who are easy to kill," sort of his justification. Although you have to wonder, if he wants to be a vampire, he's going to be killing people. So that's kind of an interesting cognitive dissonance. If he doesn't see himself as a killer, but the one thing he wants to be is a being who feasts on human bodies. Anyway, and we cut to the B plot of Laszlo and Nadia. They're on the prowl for food, and they kill this guy who insults them with this amazing line, "You heard me, Christmas past, bitch, go back to your country." And we sort of get a sense of, most importantly, of Nadia and Laszlo's relationship here, where they do have fun together. They do have a spark, but you could see Nadia is a little she finds Laszlo a little bit tedious sometimes, and maybe he wants to go, always wants to travel by bat to places. He never wants to do anything romantic. He wants to go back to the house. Well, we'll come back to that in a minute. And we cut to the A plot of Guillermo with Nandor. They're buying decorations, creepy decorations to prepare for the blood feast with the with the Baron. And obviously, Nandor buys glitter. He buys crepe paper. He calls it creepy paper, and he's very interested in kind of that silly, what he thinks is creepy, which might not be at all what anybody else thinks is creepy. And we have this great line: Guillermo is my familiar, but sometimes he's a little too familiar. And he says that right in front of Guillermo. Hope that didn't upset you, Guillermo. And Guillermo's standing there. So clearly he's taking it. He's doing everything he can to be on his best behavior for the reward of being a vampire. And we cut to what I think is the C plot. And the C plot only exists in this show in Act 2. Which I think is interesting compared to the Colin Robinson setup. But in Act 2, we sort of see Naja sort of wandering around following this guy who she's convinced is the reincarnation of her ex-lover, Gregor, who was beheaded. And she's sort of spying him masturbating through the window, and she sort of makes a sound, and he's like gets freaked out, look out his window. He's kind of a schlubby, kind of doofusy looking guy, but which is so funny compared to like how she's sort of talking about he was such a great lover, and Gregor was like, she's talking about the good times, not to get too explicit. And we cut back to the B plot of Nandor and company. The vampires, they're searching through the basement. They haven't been in years. Perfect place for a blood feast. Shit. Colin Robinson is taking up the best room. We got to get out of here. Please, quick, before he sucks our energy. And they decide we're going to go with the attic. It's like, but what about the Stairmaster? Forget it. And this is where we sort of meet the middle of the episode. The Baron's coffin arrives. This is what I would distinguish as the midpoint of the episode. It's sort of a complication for the main objective of you have to get ready for the Baron. Oh shit, he showed up. This is happening. And we go back to the C plot. Naja meets Gregor, and she finds out his name is Jeff Suckler. I think it's Suckler. And she's like, really? That's your name? Oh, forget about it, Jeff. And the way she talks is as if she's not even really listening to anything he's saying. And my favorite thing about their exchange is that she's saying some batshit crazy stuff to this guy and laughing way too loudly at things that aren't funny. And he seems like such a lonely guy that he's like desperate for the human connection. He doesn't even care. It's like, oh my God, a beautiful woman, even if she's like really creepy and strange. And we go to Guillermo and the vampires waiting for the virgins to arrive, and Laszlo and Nandor are a little edgy, like, are they going to show up Nandor? Or sorry, they're going to show up Guillermo. And when he finally sees the LARPers, they're very happy. Oh, these are really primo virgins. Well done, Guillermo. And as Guillermo's leading them into deeper into the house, they happen upon this woman who's desperately trying to escape. Clearly, they've already drunk her blood a little bit. Sort of makes you think of how like the actual horrifying reality of this. They're playing it a lot for laughs, but like people are getting kidnapped and killed, and it's terrible. But Guillermo tells them that, oh, don't worry, this is all part of our vampire LARP. I wanted you to see that. They're like, wow, so committed. And right towards the end of Act 2, we have this final moment with Jeff and Naja, where she finds out he works in a parking security, but she's like, oh, so brave, because she doesn't necessarily have any idea what that means. She just hears the word security and comes to her own, like, because apparently he was like a knight in his last life. And she's desperately sort of struggling with the temptation of, oh, should I cheat on Laszlo? But I really want to. And I think this is an important little thread. This is one of the things that's great about pilots is you want loose ends. You want to leave questions. Like, we don't come back to Jeff and Naja in Act 3, but it's a thread that like we're clearly going to get more of that. It's sort of like, what's she going to do, this poor schmucky guy? What's going to happen to him? That's definitely like an open thread throughout the series. And you want to create questions, and you want to create sort of like good questions, not just questions, like good questions, like what's going to happen to that? I want to see, like, you want to see the plot line potential. In Act 3, we start. This is where it gets a little different than a feature film script. The unexpected consequences of these characters pursuing their objectives, of getting ready for the Baron. They prepare. Nandor's covered in glitter, and the Baron opens up, and he's not like they quite remembered him. Excuse me. I just had a burrito earlier. The Baron speaks, and he basically lays into them. He says, "Your way is over. Centuries have passed. You've not conquered the new world. You are weak and hide in the shadows," which is kind of a nice drop to the title of the show. And the Baron basically, everybody's becomes very self-conscious all of a sudden of the glitter, the crepe paper, the virgins come in too early and like sort of interrupt the speech, and like they're like, "Get them, we'll get them out." And this sort of also pivots right into the hook, the new world that this event is catalyzed in their lives. The Baron's given them a mission. I want you to conquer the new world. Is this the seat of power? Okay, Staten Island. Yes, we must conquer this Staten Island. And on one hand, if this was all totally played straight, like, and it's sort of, oh, vampires conquering the world. Okay, yeah, that's an idea. But the dissonance between the documentary and like deadpan comedy and like the fact that it's, of all places they've landed, Staten Island, it's so silly. The choice of setting, the choice of character with this situation. The new world is very funny. This is a comedy. Like, that's a funny premise, that these three lazy, incompetent, selfish, sort of mildly deluded vampires have to take over the world, much less Staten Island. That doesn't even seem possible. Like, that's the hook of the show. And all pilots need to end with a teasing out what the hook is. Like, what is every other episode of this show going to be? What's the funny tension point? And this, it's these incompetent vampires trying to take over Staten Island. That's a hook. That's great. And it's perfectly sort of commented on by Laszlo's character. He says, basically, we're fucked. Because he even knows, even that goal, that's, what are we going to do? We're clearly have no idea what we're doing. But maybe, but maybe not. And they're frustrated. They're all coming downstairs. Okay, we at least going to eat the virgins. And guess what? Colin Robinson, he's sucked all of their energy. This is sort of the Chekhov's gun firing, the payoff from Act 1 of sort of, we say that Colin Robinson can suck energy. He does, and the virgins lose all of their nutritional value. It's also good not to kill them because they're great characters, especially I forget her name, but Jonah Hill's sister. Like, you want to see them come back. You don't want to kill them right away. So this is a great way to handle that. And then there's a huge sort of depressing moment for the vampires. They don't get to eat the virgins. And we go back to where we began. Bookending this episode, we begin with Guillermo waking up his master. We end with Guillermo putting his master to sleep and sort of winding down the day. And Nandor ends he sort of approaches Guillermo and says, like, don't tell me you think I would forget? Like, does an anniversary not deserve a reward? And at this moment, Guillermo sort of opens his neck. He's like, I'm ready, master. and Nandor gives him like this really cringy, horrible glitter painting of Guillermo as a vampire, and then like Laszlo is a vampire right next to him, like they're friends. He said, like, oh, isn't this great? It's like, it's like you, but you look like a vampire, and that's me right next to you. And Guillermo's like dying inside. You know, what he wanted was so close, but it's so far away. And as Nandor is going back to sleep, he says, yes, good. 2-year anniversary. Guillermo says, 10 years. And Nandor looks like, 10? Jeez. Just sort of shows you like how far from Nandor's mind it is to turn Guillermo into a vampire. And this sort of shows another aspect of New World. yes, the vampires have to deal with the Baron, but Guillermo has to deal with, oh, I'm so far away from becoming a vampire and convincing my master to turn me into a vampire. And this becomes sort of Guillermo's series-long objective to fulfill this dream, which the show writers do some really fun stuff with in season 2. So I don't want to spoil that for those who haven't seen it. But my favorite moment of the ending is Nandor's asleep, the sun's coming out, and Guillermo sort of opens the curtain, sort of vindictively looking at the coffin, and the sun's right on the coffin, because if sunlight kills vampires, for those of you who didn't know, and he quickly sort of puts the curtain back, sort of angry. And the last shot is a sunlight beam falling onto the Baron's coffin, which is like a little bit of a teaser of maybe sort of the danger for the Baron, and sort of that this place isn't really well maintained as he would guess. Anyway, that's basically the show. I love this show. I think they do such a good job with the mockumentary aspect.
Mm.
Yeah, especially the moment at the end when the Baron's giving his speech and he's like, telling us, oh, we have to just take over the world and, do everything. Who are these people? And he points to the camera people. I was like, oh, don't worry, they're the documentary crew. Just ignore them. Oh, they're filming me? And they never, not even once throughout the whole show, have they acknowledged that there's a documentary crew with them. Like, it's just such a zany moment. That doesn't make any sense, really, if you think about it. In the movie, they have crucifixes and holy water, which is why the vampires in the movie didn't do it, but they didn't explain that in the show.
The movie's great too. Would recommend the movie.
A lot darker.
Yeah. But it has Taika in it, because this is by Taika Waititi created this, right?
Yes,
with,
although Jermaine Clement,
yeah.
He's basically the showrunner, and he's the guy who wrote this. Taika basically directs a few episodes a season. He has no active involvement really with the show, just because he's so busy actually making blockbuster movies. So,
yeah, this is great.
Jackie Daytona.
Oh yeah, this one. All the cameos from all the famous vampires. Eventually, that's a crazy episode. I would definitely recommend. I would definitely recommend finishing out the show if you enjoyed this at all, because it gets very, very funny.
Oh yeah, and what they do with Guillermo's character is so smart. Like, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's really, really good. He's my favorite character, and I would say he's actually the protagonist of the whole show.
I think that's true.
Yeah, like it begins and ends with him here. I feel like that's not arbitrary.
Yeah. What did you all think? Do you all have any questions for us? I will keep them. I will pull them up, but I'm going to take this down. So yeah, we were taught. You already hit on it a lot, but part of the reason why we wanted to look at this was looking at how genres are clashing in how genres are clashing in this sitcom, and I think you hit on it really well when you were talking about, like, you have moments where it's very, very clear that this is a mockumentary.
Yes.
And like you break the fourth wall sometimes, and the way that it's done is, subtle until it's not. And I mean, I think what this does so well, it's just like a masterclass in setting up jokes.
Yes.
Like when he said that, like when Nadja was like, oh, he was a knight and he was decapitated. You're like, oh wow, God, he was killed in battle. And then you find out later that she killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a great thing. Yeah, and yeah, Michelle, you're right. It's the season just gets better, which is great, because I feel like sometimes you have a pilot that's this funny and then it's hard to keep it up, but it just gets funnier.
I would also recommend reading an episode of the show to sort of look at how many jokes are actually on the page. There's a joke on every page, sometimes 2 jokes, and they're good. Like, if you're writing a sitcom, joke per page. Like, don't fuck around. So, like, that's what it is.
So Joy says, how do you think the name relates to a sitcom? It doesn't sound like a sitcom. A sitcom is just situational comedy, right? Like, and Adam, wait, you can go ahead. You can take it.
Oh, I mean, so I think it's a little complicated by the fact that this is an adaptation, not an adaptation. This is a spin-off of an existing movie that Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement co-created. And this has the same title as that movie. And it's the same concept, basically, just in America and Staten Island with different cast characters. If the movie didn't exist, maybe the title would be a little different. But I also think that names don't really matter. I mean, names really matter, but like the fact that this is a horror comedy, like this combines genres. This isn't just a normal sitcom. This is a horror sitcom. Like there's like brutal violence. Like when they kill that guy, torrent of blood explodes. Like I mean, it's not as gruesome as the movie, but like there's real violence here. It's not like a Parks and Rec episode, you know, like people are dying and they're eating bodies and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, they casually bring up tons of really terrible, terrible things and then flash to those old photos that are just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
God. The old I love that they chose to do the mockumentary style for a lot of reasons, but especially because you get those old photos.
Yes.
Let's see.
Do you think Guillermo is a great protagonist because it gives the audience someone to relate to in this world? Yes. I think Guillermo is a great protagonist for two reasons. Aside from like his jokes and first of all, that actor is does such a fantastic job.
He's so good.
He's so good. His face he's the Jim of the show. Like he is the straight man, but he himself is kind of crazy and funny. Like in the sense of like, if you really think about it, wait, why does he want this? Is kind of like a good question, because in a lot of sense, he's like a voice of reason. He's like, no, master, you can't throw agent coins at, you know, people, you know, like here, I'll pay with my credit card. Like he is the normal person. He's the he is straight man, and every comedy needs a straight man character. Or else everybody's just wacky and there's no foil, there's no tension. But I think more importantly, he's a character who has a great unmet desire that drives everything he does.
Yeah. And this is sort of sometimes in fantasy movies or things like with a really intense new world, you will have a character who is more like the audience in order to give the audience a way into the world, so that as that character is learning about the world, so are we. And in this one, Guillermo could have been that before, but it's an interesting choice to have it be that Guillermo has been with them now for 10 years. Like he's not joining this world with us for the first time. Like he has been here forever and he is so used to it. And for
Nandor, it felt like 2 years.
Yeah.
Like it showed that was a great moment of sort of showing that, like, you know, things are relative to these vampires, and like Guillermo's trying his hardest. He's been here for a long time, but not that long of a time relative to most of the characters.
It's interesting to think about how it would be different if they'd done it that way. That happened so much, which is, I think they got away with it because they chose to do the mockumentary style in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Because when you're doing the mockumentary style, I can directly tell you things about his life. Like he can say, like, these are my tasks every day. Whereas if it wasn't, it might be advantageous to have Guillermo be like discovering that vampires are here and then deciding to become their familiar would probably be the pilot episode.
A lot of the
some
joy
alternate reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. And a lot of the joy of this show is the interviews and then the juxtaposition of what they're telling you and what it really is. So many jokes are set up that way.
Yeah. So by the way, if anybody is looking for it, we do have the pilot script linked in the description below, as well as Adam's tentpole document, the one that was on the screen when he was breaking it down. So you can look at both of those if you would like to. And also we've linked to the show if you didn't get a chance to see it yet. But just as a heads up. Let's see.
Oh, yes.
Oh, someone asked before about if we're doing a writing the pilot, and the answer is yes. We're doing it this summer. It's currently in development. We started filming tentatively, so very tentatively, but we're gonna have that this summer. And
yeah, it's going to be in a few months. It's going to come out. It's going to be very good. Or at least we think it's going to be as good as the other stuff. If you think the other stuff is good, it's going to be about the same.
Yeah, it'll be about like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if any of it's good, but it's as good as the other stuff.
There you go.
So how does one know the tone and spirit of a movie when adapting to TV while still making it original with its own merits? How do you know what to cut and keep? I mean, that's the big question, with this sort of situation. Like, there's no one answer. Like, this is dependent on execution. It depends on like what the fun of the thing is, because the best spin-offs keep the fun of the original thing. And so many bad like adaptations to TV, so many bad adaptations in general, like lose the core thing that was awesome about the source material. And it's not TV, but I always think of that horrible movie with Russell Crowe, the Robin Hood movie, where it was just terrible, by the way. Don't watch it, with Ridley Scott. And it's basically Robin Hood, is like this law enforcement guy who he doesn't even do any stealing from the rich or giving back to the poor until like the end. It's like an origin story for him, but like even in the end, he doesn't even do any of it. It's just they set him up on Sherwood Forest at the last shots of the movie, and it's sort of like, wait, isn't the fun like about like this sort of subversive like anti-establishment figure, but he's an establishment guy? Like, it didn't make any sense. It was an adaptation that didn't keep the fun. So I think no matter what it is, sort of like understanding what the tension point that makes something interesting and focusing on that, even if it has to be exclusive to TV.
As an example, an example that went the other way, if there's this fantastic Canadian show that everybody should watch called Letterkenny. I mean, this has happened with a lot of things that started as web series and then become full-on shows. And so Letterkenny, if you can look it up on YouTube and see their like original episodes, it's like the same cast for the most part, the same people, the same writers, just back-to-back jokes about living in like rural Canada is what the old show was on like the web series. So then when they moved it to TV, they had to decide, how do we make these 3-minute videos like 30 minutes? Like, how do we, like, what stays? Because it wasn't a story. It was literally just joke. And the way that they handled it was really cool, where they keep the pace of the jokes, which is insanely hard. They keep this pace as like fast as their little clips, but also have story woven in between. So there's all these moments that are just exactly like how the show used to be, of just like them literally saying different punchlines to the same joke over and over and over. It's very well done, and I would recommend checking it out. And I think it just shows another interesting way that things get adapted into another medium.
Yes, definitely. Is this subverting the genre? Yes, definitely. By just some fundamental choices, like the fact that it's a mockumentary about actual bloodthirsty vampires, and it doesn't shy away from like the horror element, but it's presented with a comedic context. Like, it's the presentation of The Office, although it doesn't go totally deep into it, but it uses the interview footage sort of technique that Parks and Rec and The Office use. Like, that choice is subverting a genre, because that's a comedy convention, doesn't go with horror very often.
I do think that in a way, like, it does subvert it, but in a way it's like not quite just straight subversion of genre, and it's more like, this is what happens when you clash a bunch of things that don't go together. Yeah. Like how Knives Out was like subverting the horror or like the murder mystery genre by revealing who you think is the killer at the beginning. So you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not.
So this is This isn't subverting the sitcom at all. It's just an odd choice for a sitcom. This is a straight up classic mockumentary sitcom with a very unusual horror backdrop. But like it's straight sitcom. Nothing they do is not structurally at odds with that.
Yeah, like it's pretty like it's like The Office, but vampires.
Sorry.
And, yeah.
Sorry, I know there are Office fans out there, and I know
I've never been able to get into it, but I think it's because of the second episode.
You gotta season 2, same as Parks and Rec. Like season 1 of Parks and Rec is terrible. Season 1 of Office is terrible. Season 1 of It's Always Sunny is terrible. All three of those shows. That one either. Well, you gotta start with season 2. It's a totally different show.
Parks and Rec was fine for me for season 1. I was fine with it, but it wasn't as so much good. Better. Yeah, but it got better. Yeah,
like I would give It's Always Sunny another chance, but like the later seasons, like it's a different show. It's like it is a different show. It's way goofier and zanier and less cringe. Anyway, I wonder if he wants to be a vampire due to some persuasion powers of Nander. All the familiars seem obsessed with the idea. To me, they're low-key. I don't read that way, and for one reason of it's less fun. Like, and I don't think the writers would want to pursue it where Guillermo is like kind of being like magically manipulated. And I also here's the proof. When he had the picture of himself as a child.
Oh yeah.
And it was a lifelong dream of him. And he talks about Antonio Banderas and how much it meant to him to see a vampire, a Hispanic vampire being depicted like so earnestly. Like, you know, that's not magical from before he met Nandor, because he only knew Nandor for 10 years. And he's in his 30s. So
I can't even really remember how much they get into his backstory later.
Maybe meet his family a little bit or something. He moves back with his family later on. They do a little bit.
Yeah. So you get a little bit more about that later, but it is a good point because, I mean, there's that one great line with Laszlo where he was like, I was hypnotized. And she was like, I used hypnosis. Yeah.
What tips would you take from this story to make you a better sitcom writer? What I would do looking at this script and specifically is, I mean, what this script does is it utilizes its design and structure. So like it uses the mockumentary format to its advantage. So whatever your sitcom is, think about like what the framework and context is for the jokes. Like Arrested Development is all about the narrator and really quick successions of scenes. Like we see little fragments of scenes and the density of information in small periods of time. The jokes lead into each other on that show. Parks and Rec is less mockumentary and more like scenes playing out. Like, so whatever it is, I would think about like, okay, where are the jokes coming from?
Yeah.
And are they funny? Like, you know,
I would also probably map out the brilliant way that they set up and then execute so many jokes. Like literally like going through and like looking page number, where did Nadja say that Gregor was decapitated in battle?
Yes.
And later, where did we find out what really happened? Like literally just going through and
Oh, my other favorite thing was the affair with they both had affairs with the Baron. Like, and Nadja's like, oh, the Baron, we had this really intense sexual relationship. Oh, I feel nervous. I wonder if Laszlo is going to think. And then we cut to Laszlo. He's like, the Baron and I had an intense sexual relationship. I'm looking forward to seeing him. Like that immediate juxtaposition. And also another thing is like most jokes that have payoffs happen 2 pages later or so. Like they don't wait a long time. Some do. Some do. There are like some long-standing jokes, but like the Gregor thing, I think happens, like that decapitation joke happens pretty soon. I think it's like the scene after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, is it? I thought it was a little bit earlier, but
was it? I could be wrong.
Here, you know, people are asking some questions about what the script is like. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put it on the screen.
Yeah, sure.
Just so we can take a peek together.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go through some questions really quickly.
Yeah.
Fake documentary cruise stick should feel so artificial, especially because we've seen it in so many shows, but it doesn't. Somehow it keeps working really well. It's really good for comedy. Yeah, I agree, man. It's great. I think my favorite aspect of it is that they actually sort of poke fun at how dangerous it would be for a documentary crew. Like that moment of recognition of being like, oh, the cameras, ignore them. Like in the Jane situation, like the stakes are so heightened. It's so unusual that you would have, like, it's not that unusual in the world of The Office for there to be camera crew. I mean, yeah, it's a little weird. It's a paper company in the middle of nowhere, but it's like not like a vampire like coven. Not coven's the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's go into the script a little bit.
This is the script, and again, it's linked in the description if you want to check it out later. But this is how it's written. Why don't we just like go through a page real quick?
Sure. Let me scan that. All right.
You can be Guillermo. Okay.
Great.
Interior, bedroom, night. We see Guillermo, a human, standing in an old-fashioned bedroom next to a coffin. He checks his watch.
It's nightfall.
A muffled foreign accent comes from the coffin. Guillermo?
Yes, sir?
Is that you?
Yes, master.
The coffin lid moves. It's jammed. It's stuck again. Guillermo goes to assist. I think it's the latch.
The job of a vampire's familiar is not an easy one. It's jammed!
Guillermo jiggles the lid of the coffin. It won't open. Interior, solo interview with Guillermo.
A vampire's familiar is kind of a best friend who's also a slave. Kind of?
Interior, bedroom, night. Coffin lid still won't open. Guillermo is trying to jimmy the latch with a butter knife. You're not trying to pry it, are you? Don't pry it. You'll foul the mechanism. Guillermo quickly stops prying and puts the butter knife in his pocket. Interior, solo interview with Guillermo.
Tomorrow night marks the 20th anniversary of when I started working for my master, and I'm pretty sure he's planning something special for me. I think tomorrow will be when he makes me a vampire.
Interior, bedroom, night. The latch has finally come open.
He awakens!
Nandor elegantly arises from his coffin. Guillermo does a double thumbs up.
Very cool, master. Super scary.
Nandor stays grinning, revealing he has vampire fangs. Awaken the others.
Okay.
And then there's this montage. This is how they handle the vampires throughout history.
Can we talk about these 2 pages real quickly?
Yeah.
So there are jokes already. There's dissonance. There's like we see like a what should be like the awakening of the master vampire. It's stuck and he's trying to open it with a butter knife. You know, this great thing, the thing about like being a familiar is kind of like being a best friend who's also kind of a slave, kind of like like immediately we know what the tone of the show is and we know where the jokes are coming from. And just to establish, to answer one of Michelle's questions, can a talking head be considered cheating in the sense that it's direct exposition? How does one execute it correctly? Yeah, it is cheating technically, but it really works well with this concept. And the way they're doing it isn't like exposition heavy. It's exposition. So in writing the feature, we have this phrase called attack with exposition. Or sort of like, if you're going to like show new information, 2 things. Have one character desperately need that information, or and that character could be somebody who's just trying to understand something, or 2, make the information kind of like bad for the situation, for the characters. And in this situation, when a character is like telling you something in an interview, it works well when they're trying to present themselves a certain way for the camera. Like if there's a dissonance, if the way they're if what they're saying is completely representative of their truth, it's exposition. Like it's the narrator it's the writer telling you things. But if it's a character who is flawed and is trying to present themselves like a certain way for the camera, and the camera is telling the audience something maybe a little different, it's information that's sort of creating tension. It's information that's like it's couched in subtext, and it tells us who these people are by what they don't see about themselves. And what makes The Office great is that. Sorry, Alexie.
I was saying things like this with like voiceovers and exposition and like and talking heads and all those things. It's about making sure that you're not being redundant, you know?
Yes.
Like if you do a voiceover and you say, I always rode my bicycle, and then we see you riding your bicycle, it's like, why does that information give me anything? You know, but if you give us something, you want contrast between the two different layers of information that you're giving. It becomes like boring and redundant if those two things are exactly the same. Like if Guillermo was fully aware of the fact that Nandor does not consider him a best friend at all, like that he is just his slave, then like this wouldn't be as funny. But the fact that Guillermo has like this lack of awareness of what's going on here, the fact that he thinks that he's going to be made into a vampire, and that's completely not what Nandor is planning at all, is what makes this funny. If he said this and then he was made into a vampire, it would be lame.
Yeah, and it's not a story. That's not a story, right? Like there's no tension, there's no conflict, there's no unmet big desires. Just one thing I want to add is if the interview is creating dissonance and is the character speaking on how they see themselves and like their version of events, and if that's different than reality, you're in good hands, pretty much. I don't think there's a single time where the characters are just telling us information. Like Nandor is trying to impress us by how ferocious he is, and when he says he's relentless, you know, like he's the following scene. Yeah, the following scene is where he just annoys Laszlo to the point where Laszlo says, "Oh fuck it, I'll give up." Like that level of relentless, just being like the irritating roommate who will keep nagging you, is so different from like this relentless killer who sacks cities and kills millions of people. Like that did, like the fact that we see that scene immediately after that information.
This reminds me of the fact that Avi couldn't make it today, but mentioned that when he was doing coverage as like an intern or, you know, a script reader, this script was actually one that he encountered. And when he was reading it, if you read this without knowing how brilliant all the actors are who deliver these lines, Avi was like, I could tell it's funny, but I could not imagine it at all. Like, if you read this and you're not that guy, I have a reputation for being a very tough kind of vampire, to be a ferocious soldier in the Ottoman Empire, which meant a lot of killing, a lot of pillaging. They'd say, have mercy, stop pillaging me. No, I'm pillaging everyone, you included. I was relentless. They called me Nandor the Relentless because I just never relent.
That's like, great. That's really funny.
It is great,
though.
But like,
that's really funny.
It is, but it's like 20 times funnier because the actor is so good too. Like it's doubled, you know.
But that does work though. Like I mean, and I imagine somebody with like an Eastern European accent of some kind, because he's, you know, like, yeah. I don't know.
Oh, the movie 110% helped the case. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, proved the whole concept. Like I don't think the show would have been greenlit without the movie.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
For sure. And it also because Taika Waititi, I feel like you said his last name differently than I did, but he was still like on the rise at the beginning of What We Do in the Shadows film. So like he was still at the point where like you're needing to prove that you can deliver material. You know what I mean? So it's like, so they made a name for themselves within this space by doing the movie.
And unfortunately, the real story of how this show got made is that Jermaine and Taika didn't actually have the idea for the show. Scott Rudin had the idea for the show and approached them. I know he's a terrible human being, but that he pitched Jermaine Clement and Taika, being like, I imagine you should do a sitcom based in Staten Island. And they were like, well, I guess we should do it. So it was like practically green. Like the producer approached them with the idea and they're like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Let's do it. Jermaine wasn't doing anything else. So But it's up to it. But aside from that, like it was Jermaine's idea to make it, and they already did it in the movie. Like the core concept worked.
Yeah, and honestly, this script, you can kind of tell that was the case with this script because it breaks a lot of rules that otherwise you would want in your script. Like there's not descriptions of Nandor. We don't really get a description of Guillermo besides a human, you know? Like there's things that if you were writing a pilot, like a pilot for yourself, because you have an idea and you wanted to take this pilot and like make a Bible and then go try to pitch it to somewhere, you would want to do some things differently, like in a technical sense than this. If it's basically not already greenlit. It doesn't mean that all the writing isn't phenomenal and that the flow and the structure and like what they're doing isn't great. Yeah. It's just that there's some things that they do that are technically wrong that if you are not yet greenlit, you want to get right just to not give anyone an excuse to.
Yeah, I mean, they were also established and all the things that are really important are working. Like it's great dialogue, great characters, like the scenes work, the structure works. And they were greenlit, so they got away with it.
Do you know if this is the case, Adam? I have not heard this.
I don't know. I'd be curious to check that out.
I'd be very curious too. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I would definitely recommend looking at this and then like using it as a reference point if you're interested in doing a mockumentary kind of thing, because the way that they handle the interviews like this, like interior interview with Nandor, just like little things like that, those are always the kind of things that get people hung up, I've found. It's like, well, how do I say that it's an interview? Do I do like interior living room and like just interview with Nandor? Move on.
It tells you everything you need to know, because it's kind of like, here's a good way of presenting it. When you were watching this when you were watching this on Hulu or wherever you watched it, what was the information you noticed? Like what the audience sees is what should be on the page. Like we'd noticed that Naja stares completely bored. Oh, we're looking at an interview with Nandor. These are the words he's saying.
This is pretty great. This writing. Hiss.
Fly at each other. That's great screenwriting right there.
So ridiculous. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking this out. I read it a long time ago and I forgot how funny it looks on the page.
See, like the best sitcoms, spec scripts should be funny on the page. If you don't have people going like, you're fucked. Nobody laughs out loud during scripts. That's just something you have to deal with as a comedy writer. Very few people do. And if I have yet to meet them, but you got to make people go. Like you got to make that happen. And if you got to make that happen, at least every other page.
Ooh. What movies do you guys want to see as TV shows? Man, oh man.
That's a good question.
It is.
That's an interesting question.
I can't even think of what I've seen.
I want Alien.
Not Short-Term 12.
I want Alien, but like the original, not Sigourney Weaver, but like the Alien 1 as a TV show, not like where it got silly later on. Like I want the idea of like, it's like something that's Alien, but kind of like Battlestar Galactica, and like that they're trying to get through space and like deal with this thing. I think that would be a fun show, like a horror film.
That'd be fun. I'm trying to think. I don't feel like I've ever sat down and been like, I wish that was a TV show. I don't know. I don't have an answer right now. I will think about that. Also, by the way, Jonah Hill's sister is Beanie Feldstein, right? I think we mentioned her before.
Yeah, she was in Booksmart.
Wanted to get her name in the world because she is incredible and does not need me to put her name in the world, but I would like to.
At least she's more than Jonah Hill's sister.
Yes. Yes.
Well, do you have anything else to talk about?
High School Musical series.
Jesus.
I mean, yeah, we can take any questions, or yeah, just like, you all have anything else about this you wanted to talk about? We're trying to see if we can streamline a little bit these things. A Book of Mormon TV show, that's true. I've not seen it, but I've heard it's very, very good.
It's funny.
Yeah, I've heard it's funny. I saw Waitress. I don't think I'd want a TV show about that either. A lot of the things that I love, I think I love because they're so well suited to what they are. Does that make sense? So it's like, if it was going to be if it was a film that I wanted to be a TV show, it would almost be because it didn't work as a film. Like, if they had tried to put too much into it. And then I know that Harry Potter is like not great now. I do remember though that April Fool's joke that happened one time where they came out with that fake series called Horrors, where it was like a trailer for like these horrors in Harry Potter, and I thought it was going to be real, and I thought it was the coolest looking thing I had ever seen in my entire life, and I was so stoked, and then it was all a lie, and I was upset about that for years. So
I'm surprised they haven't had a show.
I think that she's really picky.
It's just interesting that hasn't happened.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that hasn't happened.
She's very controlling about it. But yeah, it would have been interesting at some point. Oh, here we go. What character arcs would you like the other characters / vampires to go through? Oh.
I like what's happening. I have no desire.
Nadja goes back to school.
I want Nadja and Laszlo to get a divorce.
Yes. And she becomes a free woman and goes and wants to become educated and wants to become like a modern woman, and it doesn't go well.
I mean,
that would be funny.
That's similar to what's already been happening, sort of like.
I can't even remember, to be honest with you, where she goes. I'm just thinking it'd be funny if she tried to like blend into like an office or like. I want to see more of her doing where she's like absolutely ridiculous, like what she does with Greg or Jeff, and people.
I do feel like they do. I do feel like they use Nadja really well, like especially in season 2. Like I think they're doing good stuff with her.
Yes, night school. Nadja goes to night school.
I just feel like we already got that. We already got that with the season 1 episode where they try to like hijack the local city council.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's
like
true.
We already have like that type of thing going on.
Yeah, that's fair.
Have you two tried writing comedies? How did it go? Do you agree that it's the hardest genre? I mean, yeah, I've written comedy stuff. Never like a straight farce. We're writing a comedic script right now. I've done sketch comedy too. It's hard. Jokes are hard.
Yeah, I don't think that any genre is the hardest. I just don't. I think that all genres are like different and difficult in their own way, but that I can't think of a genre that I would just outright label as the hardest.
I have an answer.
Yeah.
The genre you aren't really obsessed with.
Yeah,
like if you don't eat, breathe, sleep the type of thing that it is, you're just never going to be great at it. It's always going to be an uphill struggle.
Yeah. Speaking of comedies, any advice for writing dark comedies? Go for it.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to be willing, like you have to have people in your life who you'll trust to read it, that you know are going to be like, that you know have like share a sense of humor with you, which is important because not everyone's going to get it. And it doesn't matter if everyone gets it, but it matters that like you have the people that get it and you know who those people would be. And if they find it funny, then you're golden. So I would say find friends or the readers that like the same comedy that you like and then run your scripts by them, but otherwise just go for it.
I think a good rule of thumb for writing dark comedies is it's about suffering It's about bad things happening to good people and bad things happening to bad people. Like, and it's not just about like, oh, suffering, blanket statement suffering, but like the right type of suffering for each person. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen to this person that isn't necessarily just physical harm? Like, what's the worst emotional problem that could happen to this person that really pushes them to the brink? And I feel like that's good dark comedy territory. Like, you want bad, like actually bad things to be happening, and you want it to be funny and that we're laughing with the people.
Because comedy is like like laughing is like a release of tension. Because comedy and jokes is like the subversion. It was like when conflict is resolved in an unexpected way, right? I think that's how I've heard comedy explained.
Yes, it's the fundamental ingredient of all comedy is surprise. If it's not surprising, you'll never get a laugh. Like it's part of like the core mechanism of what makes a thing funny to somebody is that it's like an association. It's a connection that somebody's never made before that surprised them. Whether that's like a line of dialogue, that's a event, that's a situation, that's a way a person reacts in a situation.
And that's why the Nadja joke works so well, where she tells you, she sets your expectation in the beginning. Yes. She says that Gregor was decapitated and that he was a soldier. So now we have that expectation. And then later when it's said, it's subverted the expectation that we had. It wouldn't have been, you just be like, oh my God, if we didn't have that set up in the beginning and we just found out that she killed him later, you'd be like, wow, that's a lot for somebody she loves, but it would not be as hilarious as it is since she already made us believe one thing about it.
So in a nutshell, the setup is only as funny as the payoff. Or sorry, the payoff is only as funny as the setup.
Yes.
And the other thing I've learned, so when I was just doing UCB sketch comedy briefly, there's a concept in improv comedy called game, which basically is what's the one joke of this scene and how do you escalate it? Like, what's the funny thing? This doesn't work for all comedy scenes, but it's like, okay, we've agreed that here's just a bad scene idea. We're all at a restaurant and the waiter is a vampire who's obviously a vampire, but he's pretending not to be. All of the jokes in that comedy scene should be about the dissonance between the vampire trying to pretend to not be something. Like, so what are different ways that are accelerating and progressing in intensity to express that one thing? And so it's sort of like you have setup, oh, funny thing, reset, setup, reaction, then the bigger funny thing. So it's like about a 1-2 punch. So like, and you kind of build, that's how sketch comedy works for the most part. And that's how a lot of improv comedy works. Like, not all, but that's just one way to approach it. Key and Peele, all of their sketches are designed this way. It's the one joke that keeps escalating in surprising ways. And like, so different angles of the one thing. It's not like a side joke, what they would call off game, sort of like, oh, like you wouldn't have like a random joke about like this guy who's eating lobster when it's about the vampire pretending not to be a vampire. That's a terrible example, but like fundamentally, I think that's just something interesting to think about.
So, and then Adam, I think this is a follow-up to that. We'll get to Danny's question. Do you think improv experience helps in writing comedy?
So some of the worst writers I've ever met are amazing improv people. I don't know why that is. Don't ask me. It can help. It depends. I mean, I think writing is a very introspective thing. And improv is like about making immediate connections that are surprising. And I think there's recorded improv is just never as funny as when you're there in person. I think it's something with that the kinetic. I mean, I have watched recorded improv and sometimes it's funny. But like, I think writing is a different thing.
Because like improv is all yes and, right? Like you never go back and revise and try to make it like
exactly. And it's not actually about characters. It's not about characters really.
Right. I took one improv class when I was really, really young. And I think the thing that it helped me do was just trust myself. But I don't think that and I think it was like a good experience to have to understand a little bit more about like being on the spot and like to like practice being like thrown into situations and figuring out how to handle it. But I don't think it necessarily is like a 1-for-1 thing.
Yeah.
I think it's good to do as a screenwriter for other reasons, like just like practicing being on your feet and like being in front of people and getting more comfortable in your own skin. Like that's good for pitching and things like that. But I don't necessarily think that in terms of just straight screenwriting that improv is a direct connection. I'm sure that that's probably very disputed. I'm sure that some people feel very strongly the opposite. But that's
I actually agree with you. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I think improv is really fun, and that's why people should do it. And maybe it'll help you sort of think more about jokes. Maybe I think improv can make you better at writing jokes. It won't make you a better writer.
Mm-hmm. So here is Danny's question. What would your advice be to anyone who wanted to spec this series? First, I don't know how much specs are still a thing.
Some people, there's a resurgence right now.
Is there?
I've heard people talking that it's been happening. So
let's quickly define what so a spec script. There's two different in feature writing. A spec script is a script that you write on speculation. It's a script that no one is paying you for. It's your original idea. You're just writing it to write it, and you're going to hope to sell it or use it to get a job later. That is feature writing. In TV, a spec script is something completely different. It's when you write your own episode of an existing show. And a lot of times, it used to be the case, and I guess it's coming back, that in order to get jobs in TV, you have to spec something that's fairly like recent to like show that you're like able to jump into a writer's room and pick up their tone and like continue characters and all these things. And the thing with choosing what specs to write is that you never want to spec a show that is what you're trying to like. You don't want to spec something that the people you're giving it to made. Like if you wanted to work for these people, if you wanted to work for the same people who made What We Do in the Shadows, you would never spec what you do in the shadows and then give it to them, because they're going to notice everything. They're like, Nadja would never say that. Whereas it's like it's their baby, it's their creation. They're going to
also,
be
I
really,
think
really
there's a legal liability issue, I think, as well.
That too. Yeah, exactly. So if you wanted to get on What We Do in the Shadows, you would find a different comedy or mockumentary or something that's modern and similar, but not this and not by the same people. And you would spec that and then send that in as part of your application, assuming that they were asking for spec scripts, and assuming that they hadn't given you a list of things that you were allowed to spec. Sometimes they'll tell you specifically. It used to be that everybody and their mother was speccing Modern Family. That was like it for a long time. Everybody was speccing Modern Family, and I think like Atlanta. Like it was, they just like, you go through these different phases, like where everyone wants to spec the same things. But I guess my advice, if you wanted to spec any series, is to first off make sure that you're like, that you have a reason to be doing it, like a very specific reason to be doing it. If you're just practicing, then watch the whole thing. Make sure that you're not doing stuff they've already done.
Yep. Yep. I wrote a spec for It's Always Sunny about 9 years ago. It wasn't good, but the plot was Dennis robs a sperm bank to replace the sperm with his own sperm, with his secret vault, because he thinks like he's gonna like lose his he's gonna become infertile or something. That's something Dennis would do. But I think there's a similar, but like you have to think, and it wasn't good. I just want to say that it was 9 years ago. Give me a break. But yeah, you want to think about like, what would the character do? Like, what would be the plot line? And you want, like, sitcoms are always usually about one character as the A plot. So like, you want to think about like, okay, what's the A plot concept of this? It's character does X, and then you get other plots related to it. Yeah.
And then let's see, would you ever break an episode of Curb or discuss how to write an improvised script, which I assume as an outline for the episode. So it's possible that we'll try to get a guest at some point in the future to come on and talk with us more about improv scripts and how they work. In the meantime, we don't necessarily have any intentions of breaking improv stuff as far as I know, but I'd be open to like bringing someone on who knows more about it.
Well, with Curb in particular, and The League which is the other big one in the last 10 years, they're actually like pretty airtight structurally because they're outlined pretty in depth. Like every event that happens is structured. It's just the dialogue is made up. And like you could totally break an episode of Curb and be like, yeah, that's 3-act structure. Yeah, that makes sense. That's like we could break it. We could totally do that. I just don't know how useful it is to sort of break improv projects, because the ultimate point of this YouTube channel and Young Screenwriters is to help people write better spec scripts and do stuff. So I don't know how useful that would be. I do think Larry David is amazing at writing plots, especially for Curb. And there's some amazing plots. I don't know if Alexie, if you've seen a lot of the show, but it's amazing.
Nope.
Amazing,
Adam,
funny.
Do you have an answer for this? What's your favorite joke from a comedy?
I don't know, man.
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
My favorite joke from a comedy immediately off the top of my head is that scene at the end of Rat Race where Rowan Atkinson's character, he's at the vault and he's a narcoleptic the whole time. So he's just like falling asleep in the middle of the race, like standing up. And everybody in the show, it's like six people all get keys to a locker with $1 million in it. It's the first person who gets to the locker gets the $1 million. And it's like this cutthroat, horrible, just people are like scrabbling. They're all running. One's on a horse. One person came in on a helicopter. Like they're all like just going for this locker, and they all burst into the room at the same time. And they see Rowan Atkinson, his key in the locker, and they're all crestfallen. And they realize he's asleep with his key in the locker. That's my favorite joke. That's just the first. It's not actually my favorite joke. That's just the first thing that came to mind, which is interesting because I haven't seen the movie in a long time.
This is such a cheesy answer, but my husband has the most ridiculous, amazing laugh ever, which, as Adam, you know. And
it's very good.
It's a very good laugh. And if something can make him laugh that hard, then I automatically find the whole situation much more funny. So that's the only things I can think of right now are just things like where he started like dying laughing, which was some joke in New Girl. It was like when he like crashed his car or something. Oh my God, I don't remember, but he died laughing for days. And so I found it funny that he found it funny. Anyway, that's not a good answer.
What a barren
good show.
It's a terrible show.
I love that show.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh God.
New Girl.
I have very strong negative feelings about New Girl personally, but that's my bag. Wow. That's my cross. I just find Zooey Deschanel to be like, how should I say this nicely? She's a wasteland of a person. Like you look into her eyes and like there's like nothing there. Like I truly believe
that's your nice version.
I just really think she's terrible. I think she's a terrible actress. I think she's not funny. I think everybody else in that show is funnier than she was in that show. And I also think just in general, I just don't get it. Her sister is so much more talented than her.
I don't know who that is.
Emily Deschanel, the star of Bones.
Oh, right.
They're sisters, okay. Yeah. Because they're both nepotism, because their dad is a famous cinematographer, Caleb Deschanel.
Look at this, Adam. No, that wasn't nice at all.
I don't care.
Please.
You guys can.
But here was Carl's. This was it. He said, Colin. I'll post the clip in the Discord. It was a really, really stupid scene, but Carl still like cries laughing thinking about it, and I find that very amusing. So, anyway, let's talk about what's happening next week because it's very exciting. We have a guest coming who I am very excited about. His name is James Felder. He is at NYU at the head of the dramatic writing department, which is different than the film department. It's all like screenwriting, TV, plays, and he's going to come talk to us about writing for animation specifically. He's written on a bunch of animated shows that you've probably heard of, like Ben 10 and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Back in the day, he edited Daredevil, the comic book. He was at Marvel for a bit. And he has an animated feature coming out soon. The pandemic, I think it got stuck in post, but it's coming out soon. So he's been doing a ton of animated stuff. Apparently he's great. Our last guest was the one who recommended him, and I loved her. If you loved Clara, she likes him. So good world. So that's going to be super fun. I know a lot of you are interested in writing for animation, so be sure to start thinking up some questions that you want to ask him about either animated TV or animated films. He hasn't been in comics for like 10 years, but I'm sure he could still talk about that too. Yeah. And then after that is Pitch Week. And that is it for June.
Fantastic.
But thank you everybody for coming. And
thank you.
We will see you then. Bye.
All right. Adios.